Hey guys, welcome to part 4 of Peter Walker's Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. We are now in chapter 2, entitled Levels of Recovery. Healing from complex PTSD is above all complex. This is important to emphasize because there are numerous one-dimensional approaches to trauma that bill themselves as cure-alls. In my opinion, however, singular approaches are unable to address all the levels of wounding that combine to cause complex PTSD. Moreover, working with simplistic approaches can leave you stranded in toxic shame when you do not achieve the touted results. Now, that's important. I'm going to repeat that. Working with simplistic approaches can leave you stranded in toxic shame when you do not achieve the touted results. I was motivated to write this book in large part because of the many times I sank into new levels of self-contempt when the latest panacea therapy did not cure me. I will use the word key repeatedly to describe the various tasks upon which recovering hinges. This book offers a key chain of perspectives and techniques to unlock yourself from being what Alice Miller called a prisoner of your childhood. Abusive and abandoning parents can injure and abandon us on many levels: cognitive, emotional, spiritual, physical, and relational. To recover, you need to learn how to support yourself to meet your unmet developmental needs on each level that is relevant to your experience of childhood trauma. This chapter is a brief overview of the many tasks involved in complex PTSD recovery. These tasks are explored at greater lengths in part 2. The comprehensive table of contents at the beginning of this book will direct you to further information on each of the topics covered in this chapter. Please allow yourself to also use the table of contents to explore sections of the book that pique your interest. Key developmental arrests in complex PTSD. What follows is a list of some of the most common developmental arrests that occur in complex PTSD. You may find that you experience a diminishment or absence of these key features of healthy human beings. Before we start this, if you end up feeling a pang of pain in your gut, it's okay. It'll pass eventually. What follows is a list of some of the most common developmental arrests that occur in complex PTSD. You may find that you experience a diminishment or absence of these key features of healthy human beings. Typically, survivors will vary on which and how many of these arrests relate to them. Factors affecting this are your 4Fs type. Now, if you don't know what the 4Fs type, if you just jumped in this video, go back to part 3 to find out what those are. In short, they are fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. Affecting this area are your 4F types: your childhood abuse / neglect pattern, your innate nature, and any recovery work that you have already accomplished, aka any of shadow work that you've already accomplished. Now here's the list. Self-acceptance, a clear sense of identity. Self-compassion, self-protection, capacity to draw comfort from relationship, ability to relax, capacity for full self-expression, willpower and motivation, peace of mind, self-care, belief that life is a gift, self-esteem, and self-confidence. Apparently, that's the list of what makes a healthy human being. Self-acceptance, clear sense of identity, self-compassion, self-protection, capacity to draw comfort from relationship, ability to relax, capacity for full self-expression, willpower and motivation, peace of mind, self-care, belief that life is a gift, self-esteem, and self-confidence. My efforts to nurture myself in these arrested areas of development were limited and spoiled in early recovery by a feeling of resentment. Why do I have to do this? Was a common internal refrain. Resentment that should have been directed toward my parents often boomeranged onto me and spoiled or thwarted my efforts of self-nurturance. Thankfully, ongoing recovery work helped remedy these resentments. It taught me to practice self-care in a spirit of giving to a child who needed and really deserved to be helped. I find it helpful to approach developmental arrests from the viewpoint of novelist David Mitchell's quip that, quote, "Fire is the sun unwinding itself out of the wood." Similarly, effective recovery is unwinding the natural potential you were born with out of your unconsciousness. This is your innate potential, which may be as yet unrealized because of your childhood trauma. An especially tragic developmental arrest that afflicts many survivors is the loss of their willpower and self-motivation. Many dysfunctional parents react destructively to their child's budding sense of initiative. And if this occurs throughout his childhood, the survivor may feel lost and powerless in this life. No, as a child, whenever you want to do something and the answer was always no, or you were never taught to say no. If this occurs throughout his childhood, the survivor may feel lost and purposefulness in his life. He may drift through his whole life rudderless and without a motor. Moreover, even when he manages to identify a goal of his own choosing, he may struggle to follow through with extended and concentrated effort. Remedying this developmental arrest is essential because many new psychological studies now show that persistence, even more than intelligence or innate talent, is the key psychological characteristic necessary for finding fulfillment in life. It's about persistence. I have worked with many survivors stranded in this form of adult helplessness. Those who recover from it typically do so by engaging extensively in the angering work of grieving that is discussed throughout this book. I'm going to say that again. I have worked with many survivors stranded in this form of adult helplessness. Those who recover from it typically do so by engaging extensively in the angering work of grieving that is discussed throughout this book. I was just talking to a friend about that just last night. The ability to invoke willpower seems to be allied to your ability to healthily express your anger. With sufficient recovering, you can learn to manufacture your volition. In the beginning, you can fake it until you make it. This is what Stephen Johnson calls the hard work miracle. Fake it till you make it. Persistence. What follows is a concluding comment about developmental arrests. Some survivors have confided Some survivors have confidence but not self-esteem. In childhood, my own flight response got channeled into acquiring academic skills for which the outside world rewarded me. But the benefit of these rewards never penetrated my toxic shame enough to allow me to feel that I was a worthwhile person. My critic, like my parents, always found something flawed in me to contradict the feedback that I was getting. 99% on a test was never a cause for pride. Rather, it was the impetus for a great deal of self-criticism about the missing 1%. Like many other survivors that I have worked with, I developed an imposter syndrome. It's a big one, the imposter syndrome. This syndrome contradicted the outside positive feedback that I was receiving. It insisted that if people really knew me, they would see what a loser I was. Eventually, however, I became confident in my intelligence, even though my self-esteem was still abysmal. For me, I was kind of oblivious all the time. I've always been a little oblivious. So I in regards to my self-esteem, at 17, I got on stage and I kept getting good roles for like 19 years, like leads. The majority of them were leads. And I never was called beautiful or anything like that beforehand, but especially the first handful of shows I did, you know, I was starting to barely learn to act, so I was kind of like not that good. But they kept giving me parts and I got better till I got pretty excellent at it. So, but at the beginning, at 17 years old, even though I never heard anything positive about my looks or anything like that, no proof that I was anywhere in the realm of good looking, I ended up getting that feedback from the audience. And then I immediately turned it into, instead of accepting it as a compliment and recognizing, hey, you've never been called beautiful before. Instead, I took that and said, oh, they just think I look a certain way, but they must think I'm a dumbass and that I suck at acting because they're not mentioning anything about my acting. It took years to get over that. And by years, I mean, that was at 17. I didn't fully recover from that BS until I was in 35, and a dear friend named Estella, she kept informing me how intelligent I was. I was 35 when I found out I was intelligent. Now I'm like, well, no shit, but I didn't know. Nobody had told me. And I was an F student in high school because I was always ditching because I was just never there. The abuse didn't stop till I was 17. Sexual abuse didn't stop till I was 17. So I was never there. And then I started acting. And then I got lost in working really hard at being a set designer and scenic painter and all this other stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I fast forward to 35, somebody with a PhD in botany, that means, or whatever it is where you do plants. Stella discovered an onion, actually, and Nate got to name it. But anyway, she looked at me like I was, it was very ironic. She looked at me like I was dumb. I was like, do you not realize how intelligent you are? And she just kept telling me how smart I was all the time and kept expressing specifically why she thought so. And if you ever see that in somebody else, even if you already think they know that they're smart, let them know. You may be the first person ever to tell them. It could change their self-esteem and self-confidence, like it did for me. Cognitive healing, back to this. The first level of recovery usually involves repairing the damage that complex PTSD wreaks on our thoughts and beliefs about ourselves. Cognitive recovery work aims to make your brain user-friendly. It focuses on recognizing and eliminating the destructive thoughts and thinking processes you were indoctrinated with as a child. Cognitive healing also depends on learning to choose healthy and more accurate ways of talking to and thinking about yourself. On the broadest level, this involves upgrading the story you tell yourself about your pain. Say that one again. On the broadest level, this involves upgrading the story you tell yourself about your pain. We need to understand exactly how appalling parenting created the now self-perpetuating trauma that we live in. We can learn to do this in a way that takes the mountain of unfair self-blame off ourselves. We can redirect this blame to our parents' dreadful child-rearing practices. And we can also do this in a way that motivates us to reject their influence so that we can freely orchestrate our journey of recovery. I like that because it's saying, yeah, you can just look at the facts. It's not a blame game. If some of you are thinking, no, it's just a blame game. No, we're looking at the facts. I realized when I wanted to be a parent in my mid-30s, I thought I was going to be a parent because I got married or whatever. And a friend of mine said, well, how are you going to be a good mom if you have such a shit mom? And that rocked me. And so I delved into all sorts of books about parenting. And that's where my recovery started, because I realized that, holy smack, I didn't have any of this. I had this, I had that, and none of this, and none of all of that. And I realized, yeah, my mom was a shit parent. She thought, she's like, I'm a good provider. You have a roof over your head and food in your mouth. Well, yeah, thanks. I'd rather have been hungry in, one-room apartment, sharing a bed, and have been loved by my mother. I would have preferred that. Thank you very much. But once I realized that, accepted that, transferred the shitstorm that she always gave me about being a shit person because I never made her happy, to recognizing, oh, that was just really bad parenting. I recognize that, put that over there, and then now I can recreate myself because that person's input has proven not to be valid. This work then requires us to build a fierce allegiance to ourselves. Such loyalty strengthens us for the cognitive work of freeing our brains from being conditioned to attack so many normal parts of ourselves. Cognitive work, this is deep stuff, dude, guys. Cognitive work is fundamental to helping you disidentify from the self-hating critic with which your parents inculcated you. The critic they embedded in you, because it's really their voice you're hearing. The self-critic, if you really stop and think about it, it might be in your own voice now, but if you think back when you were a kid, whose voice was the original critic? It was your parents, whether they were there or not, because they were the ones that mattered the most to you. You were a kid, so all the bullshit they told you, you just repeat it over and over, and that is what embedded that critic in your head. And as you got older, you may have switched it to your own voice, but guess what? You didn't come up with that shit. You did not come up with that critic. As I am writing this, my son's friend synchronistically tells me, quote, "This Lego creature I made spreads brain attack and eats away at the person." I marvel at the synchronicity, and I think, what a fitting image for the trauma-inducing parent. Indeed. Shrinking the critic. Early abuse and abandonment forces the child to merge his identity with the superego. The part of the child's brain that learns that rules of his caretakers, the part of the child's brain that learns the rules of his caretakers in order to get and maintain acceptance. However, because acceptance is impossible in the complex PTSD engendering family, the superego gets stuck working overtime to achieve the impossible. Perseverating on finding a formula to win over her parents, the child eventually embraces perfectionism as a strategy to make her parents less dangerous and more engaging. Her one hope is that if she becomes smart, helpful, pretty, and flawless enough, her parents will finally care for her. My mom wasn't really like all into my acting, even though I did it for 19 years, until I got the lead in the official California outdoor play called Ramona, and I was on like splattered all over the town and in billboards in LA and on the radio and the newspapers and blah blah blah. That's when she showed up to a rehearsal, for crying out loud. It was a rehearsal. She showed up to a rehearsal. I was like blown out of my mind. I was all hyper. I went over there and like was taking pictures of her in the audience in this amphitheater just because I couldn't believe she was actually there. Well, it was because so many people were saying, "Oh, your daughter? That's your daughter? Oh my God!" Yeah. Perseverating in finding a formula to win over her parents, the child eventually embraces perfectionism. Blah blah blah. Sadly, continued failure at winning their regard forces her to conclude that she is totally flawed. Fatally flawed. She is loveless not because of her mistakes, but because she is a mistake. She can only see what is wrong with or missing in her. Anything she does, says, thinks, imagines, or feels has the potential to spiral her down into a depressed abyss of fear and toxic shame. Her superego fledges into a full-blown, trauma-inducing critic. Self-criticism then runs non-stop in a desperate attempt to avoid rejection, inducing mistakes. Drasticizing becomes obsessive to help the child foresee and avoid punishment and worsening abandonment. At the same time, it continuously fills her psyche with stories and images of catastrophe. And that's not just with her parents. I mean, this becomes her outlook on everything, on her job, on any project that she's working on, even just keeping her house straight. Like anything that she's involved with, he or she, it becomes this that is being described here. Every relationship, every friendship, every romantic friendship, friendships with co-workers, it affects every aspect of your life. Drasticizing becomes obsessive to help the child foresee and avoid punishment and worsening abandonment. At the same time, it continuously fills her psyche with stories and images of catastrophe. The survivor becomes imprisoned by a jailer who will accept nothing but perfection. He is chauffeured by a hysterical driver who sees nothing but danger in every turn of the road. Chapter 9 and 10 focus exclusively on practical tools for shrinking your critic. But we're only in chapter 2, so keep holding on for that one. The developmentally arrested healthy ego. Or you can go on any of the book platforms. Like I have mine on Kindle, and it was very reasonably priced. The digital copy, you can get it on Amazon for sure, Kindle for sure. It's like once again, complex CPTSD. It's CPTSD, From Surviving to Thriving by Peter Walker. The developmentally arrested healthy ego. Now we go from the superego and how that gets all jacked up to the regular ego. The developmentally arrested healthy ego. Over time, the critic becomes more and more synonymous with the survivor's identity. Like I said, I used to have a committee. The superego morphs into a totalitarian critic that trumps the development of a healthy ego. The ego develops later than the superego, by the way. Ego, contrary to popular usage, is not a dirty word. In psychology, the term ego represents what we typically mean when we use terms like myself or my identity. The healthy ego is the user-friendly manager of the psyche. I'm going to say that again. The healthy ego is the psychological term ego is the user-friendly manager of the psyche. Unfortunately, CPTSD-inducing parents thwart the growth of the ego by undermining the development of the crucial egoic process of self-compassion and self-protection. They do this by shaming or intimidating you whenever you have a natural impulse to have sympathy for yourself or stand up for yourself. God help you if you stood up for yourself in my house. Oh, that is so disrespectful. You get one to the... Or stand up for yourself. The instinct to care for yourself and to protect yourself against unfairness is then forced to become dormant. Psychoeducation and cognitive healing. Becoming psychoeducated about CPTSD is the first level of addressing this poisonous indoctrination of your mind against your healthy ego. When you intricately understand how antagonistic your parents were to your healthy sense of self, you become more motivated to engage in the self-help process of rectifying their damage. The more you identify their damage, the more you know what to fix. That's why you got to look at it. It's not judgment, it's just looking at the facts, cause and effect, you know? This is essential because without a properly functioning ego, you have no center for making healthy choices and decisions. What? Whoa, wait, what? Yeah, that's right. This is essential. The more you identify their damage, the more you know what to fix. This is essential because without a properly functioning ego, you have no center for making healthy choices and decisions. All too often, your decisions are based on the fear of getting in trouble or getting abandoned, rather than on the principles of having meaningful and equitable interactions with the world. Get to know yourself in a healthy, loving way so that you can have integrity and be able to protect yourself and make healthy decisions. You can learn to gradually replace the critic's toxic perspective with a viewpoint that supports you in your life and that stops you from unnecessarily scaring yourself. You are free now as an adult to develop a peace of mind and supportive relationship with yourself. A self-championing stance can transform your existence from struggling survival to a fulfilling sense of thriving. You can begin right now by inviting your instincts of self-compassion and self-protection to awaken and bloom in your life. All right, guys. My little kitty cat who's passed out, little Sage, Rosie Sage, and Dexter, and Keena all say bye for now. And not going to Portugal. We decided we got too much going on with the buildings projects that we're doing, because we're supposed to go to Portugal. Me and my friend Electron were supposed to go in like 35 days or something. I don't know, September 20th. And today's August 14th. But earlier this week we decided, no, we're going to postpone the month-long trip to somewhere awesome, somewhere far away in this beautiful planet, till either December or January, because we got too many projects. And I just got promoted at work to the meat department. So this Mexican is going to learn to be a butcher. This lady Mexican is going to be a butcher. And I just started training this last few days, and what's cool about that is that my meat management boss lady is also a lady, Mexican lady. So we're gonna have a full Mexican, a female empowered meat department with, of course, our other dear awesome boss, Matthew. So we got 3 people in the meat department now, and I'm one of them. So in combination with the projects of working at the Earthship House and the Ranch House and other projects that we're doing, preparing for, and that my friend is involved with, and the things that I'm involved with, all in combination, we decided to postpone the trip to Portugal to and instead going to go somewhere to be determined in January or December. So there's that. Okay, there's your update from my end to yours. Much love. Talk to you later, guys. Bye.